Hey guys, so in today's video, I want to talk about the current energy crisis that we're in. We all feel it in the pump. Whenever we go to fill up for gas, the price year to year has increased dramatically, and that has also trickled over to food like groceries and even at restaurant because those food cost money to be transported via either flights with plane or with trucks. So all of those run on diesel, and the price of those has increased as well, which result in us paying more for the food because the transportation of the food is going up, and also our own transportation is going up. So whenever we drive and we fill up for gas, either gas or diesel, those has increased year to year as well. And in today's video, I want to talk about why the cost of those are increasing so dramatically, and how that's not only affecting the US, it's also affecting the rest of the world, and why this is happening, and what is the possible outlook for going on in the future. So let's get started. So one of the first reasons as to why the prices of oil went up is that, of course, the pandemic. During the pandemic, people were driving less and business were closing down, so there was less need for oil, less need for transportation, which as a result caused the futures market of the oil to become, for the first time, to become negative. And on Monday, dropped at the lowest point of negative 37.6 a barrel. And this is from the NY mix, which is the commodity futures market. And yeah, it causes the price of oil to drop to a negative, which is for the first time ever. And you can see they have a graph here, and as you can see right there, in 2020 during the pandemic, there was just a steep drop, and it got to a point where it was more expensive to produce this oil and store it than to actually don't produce any oil at all, which resulted in a lot of the companies that produce oil to just halt production. And now that everything has rebound back, they're still ramping up production because it takes time for the oil rig to be back into commission, and they have also laid off workers who have not yet fully returned to working for this oil company to help produce oil, which makes sense to that the oil is increasing because now the demand has boomed, but then the supply is failing to meet the demand because these oil has shut down during the pandemic. All right, so if we look here, this is the price of commodities. So this is the price of Brent crude oil. And if you look here in 2020, when the pandemic started to happen, there was a steep drop because companies were shutting down, people were working from home, and there wasn't that much of a need for energy because all of the commodities drop. And if you go beyond 2020, it's like a bull market where it increased so dramatically. And if you look down here, these are the other commodities. So here we have the good old oil, Brent crude oil, you have natural gas, gasoline, and if you look at here, coal almost double, which I can kind of understand why, because there's been a big move away from coal and into other less pollution causing energy commodities like oil and natural gas. And so there's been a lot of underinvestment into coal, and so coal production has decreased dramatically over the years, and now there's a big need for all of these commodities, including coal, which is why the price of coal has increased a lot, in addition to all these other commodities like oil and natural gas and gasoline. And it's just not good for the economy in general. And of course, another big reason is the Russian-Ukraine war. Since Russia has invaded Ukraine, a lot of NATO countries has sanctioned Russia, and that includes sanctioning their central bank, their goods, and also of course their oil and gasoline. And with Russia being one of the top exporter of energy like oil and natural gas, that's going to artificially increase the prices of oil and gas, especially to European countries, So this graph shows how much of Russian oil gets exported to their destination. So if you look here, the biggest chunk at 29% is the European Union. So the European Union gets most of their oil from Russia. And you look down here, who import how much Russian barrels. So if you look here, Germany is at the top and they import a lot. And then if you look through here, most of them is from Europe. So Europe import a majority of the oil from Russia, which give Russia a lot of political advantage, because if they were to sanction all of the oil from Russia, where are they going to find their resources to replenish what they lost by sanctioning Russia? So this in turn gives Russia a lot of political advantage over them. And you even look down here, it shows which country is most dependent on Russian oil. And you look down, all of these are, Europe. Most of Europe are dependent on Russia. So, this is just going to give Russia a lot of political advantage in the future. So how about the US? Where do we get our oil? And luckily, we produce our oil in-house. We are one of the biggest producer of oil. And you look here, at Texas. Texas seems to be one of the biggest oil producers. So we have a lot of land that has oil in it that we can refine and use. So we're less impacted by sanctioning Russia. And if you look here, we're neck and neck with Russia as one of the top producing countries of crude oil. So if we get most of our oil in-house, meaning we produce most of our oil, why is Russian oil affecting us so much? And it's because you have to think about oil as globally. Every country uses oil, and oil gets shipped around. So if Europe or Asia is getting less oil from Russia, that means that we have to ship our oil over to them to help them, because as they are our allies, they are part of the NATO. So if they are in an energy crisis, we have to export our oil to help them, and it's in our best political interest to help them, which result in our oil pricing increasing, because we are getting less of it, because they are getting shipped over to Europe and to anyone else that needs it as a result of this oil crisis. So if we are in an energy crisis, why don't we get OPEC countries, which is countries that produce a lot of oil, to increase their production so that it can meet the demand? And they're simply not increasing production enough, mainly because they are focusing, as you can see right here, on shareholders' return rather than production growth, which means that they know that the price of oil is high, and they profit a lot when the price of oil is high. And so there's a big problem with scarcity, so they want to cash in on that. And because of that, if they were to produce more oil, the price of the barrel will decrease, meaning that their oil is not worth as much anymore because they're producing more of it. And so their profit margin is going to take a hit, which is why they have been more reluctant to increase the production dramatically. And also there's a worker shortage, and since they have cut down production during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of the production is still ramping up. So it doesn't look like the energy crisis is going to resolve anytime soon, as the European Union is set to impose more sanctions on Russia, and that's going to lead to even more increases in prices of goods and more increases in prices of energy, as Europe is going to face a shortage by not importing from Russia, and so we have to send them our oil, or they're gonna have to get that oil from somewhere else, which is gonna cause just a global increase in oil costs. You can see here. And this comes at a very unprecedented time as the euro is hitting a new low. It's hitting a one-to-one level with the dollar. So it's causing parity, which is a one-to-one conversion from the euro to the dollar. And if you look in here, the euro to the dollar is hitting a 20 years low, meaning the power of the euro has initially was higher than the dollar, but since all of these inflations and sanctions and low supply chain has caused the euro to drop, and now we reach a point of parity, which just means that it's a one-to-one conversion from the dollar to the euro.